It's podcast day. It's podcast day. Welcome in. Hey friends, it's Mars here. I welcome you into this space. Welcome to my channel. This is heyBrownBerry Knitting, and I am back again with more things to talk about. I like having a space to do that, and I especially like having you here to share that with. If this is your first visit to my channel, I appreciate you taking some time out in your YouTube browsing to stop and visit with me. And for those of you who come here for conversation over and over, thank you, thank you, thank you. I have wanted to sit down in front of the camera for a couple of weeks now, and I'm really trying to honor the level of energy that I want to bring to a conversation. And I don't just mean I feel like I need to come only when I'm feeling positive or cheerful, more that the things I've been reflecting on in my recent episodes are things that kind of develop in my mind over time. And so to articulate them and share them with you and come and ask you questions as to how you're feeling does take a certain kind of energy for me. And I've just decided that today is a good day to make use of that energy. So thank you so much for participating and allowing me to spin on some stuff. Thanks also, I don't want to forget to express my gratitude for those of you who commented on the last video where I was talking about yarn choices that I've made over time and how they've changed. And in fact, all the conversations that I feel like I've been having with you for the last few months have really been fulfilling. It's so nice to go to the comment threads and see how you're feeling about the topic I've raised, and to see you even connecting with each other and just kind of talking through things. We are all dealing with very different kinds of interaction in the last year plus. And I'm just glad that YouTube has a place where we can talk things out. I think it's also nice, being honest, when I feel like things might be unique to me and might just be one of my weird quirks, but then I find out that other people feel exactly the same way or have been thinking and planning the same way. It's nice. It feels good. It feels like community. And that's why I do this. So this video is inspired by this little book, which may not look like much, but it's a favorite item of mine. That little sheepy pottery piece was made by Natalie of Remembrances Pottery, and I've put it on the front of a small planner. This planner is something I showed in the last episode and intended to talk to you more about what's inside. So I have been trying for 1 month now to plan out my days. I have wanted a kind of structure to help me feel better organized, and I've wanted a better structure to my day to help me feel like progress is being made in certain areas. And I thought I would share with you what it's been like to do some planning for about 30 days now. I feel the need to tell you this is not a planner video. I didn't buy a planner system. There isn't a lot in here that has anything to do with becoming a planner, that capital P kind, I guess, where it's like super structured. This is my way to use time well, and also to see where I might not be using time well. I've started with a very simple system of writing out the hours in a day from mostly when I wake up until a few hours after I finished work at my day job. It came after a conversation with my husband where I was telling him how overwhelmed I sometimes felt. And on the days when I felt the most overwhelmed, I was also feeling like I didn't get very much done. So that is not something that I think is sustainable or really good for me. And there was a time where I just would have kept going, even knowing that. But my push for this year is to reflect. To spend time in reflection, especially when I feel that something isn't working, and to look at it openly. So I started very simply by using this little book to write out blocks of hours in the day, genuinely 30 minutes to 60 minutes of time. And in some cases, deciding what I would do with that time and seeing kind of where I could fit in things. The context of this is that I work a regular day job. I'm a maker. I love to knit and stitch and dye and sew, but my paycheck gig is a pretty standard, it's not necessarily 9 to 5, but I think many of you will know what I mean when I say it's a 9 to 5. I start and work about an 8-hour day and take a break here or there. It's a lot of sitting down, being on the phone, being on the computer. And I love to do some form of making, and I need to have some form of downtime in any given day. Anyway, I decided to go about this because I'm balancing a somewhat structured workday for my full-time job and the desire to do some form of creative work, play every day, or at least to take my brain out of that work mode in a really gentle way. I did not used to do this, and I certainly didn't balance it well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what I have discovered in that process. I hope that you enjoyed some of the nature scenes that I'm planning to share in this episode and in upcoming episodes. I recently had the great fortune of taking a long, slow walk in areas of my neighborhood that my husband and I usually visit. I saw so many more things because I took my camera with me on this walk with the intent to capture this environment and to share it. I see these places several times a week, but something about having my camera and wanting to capture what it was like had me even more focused on some of the small, beautiful details. Do you find that too? You have these moments where something you've seen over and over and over again suddenly appears different to you, or you see a piece of it that you hadn't noticed before. I hope you do, because it was really satisfying to have that in something that I thought I was just taking for granted. So I'll share more of that with you as I can. I hope it brings you some quiet and calm. I wanted to catch you up a little bit. I have finished a project to share with you, and I have a couple things that I'm wearing that reminded me of other makers of whom I am a great admirer. So first, what I finished. During December, I worked on a project that was primarily made in a very sentimental mood because my friend Adrian of the Freakish Lemon podcast had dyed up 24 mini skeins in both BFL and cotton yarns and gifted me those mini skeins. They were all naturally dyed, and Adrian really impressed me with the range of plants and dye materials that he used. And I was so grateful for that, to enjoy how beautiful they were, but also really excited that I was able to use some of those mini skeins. So here's what I made. I finally finished my naturally dyed wrap. It's a wrap. It was going to be a top, and I miscalculated sizing for the top, and then also realized that it was really important to me to use all of the BFL and some of the cotton naturally dyed skeins in this project. So I rerouted, and instead of making a very oversized top, I made this oversized wrap. And as you can see, it's full of these saturated but still muted colors, all made from plants. Indigo and clementine and apple bark. And then in between the naturally dyed minis, I included some mill ends of a wool blend that was just undyed in this cream, which made for some really nice stripes. And in order to create the wrap, I actually had just done a long rectangle and then tried it on, because I wanted it to be one of those things that could keep both my neck and shoulders warm. Let me back you up a little bit so you can see me a bit more. I really wanted some good coverage here. So when my arms are warm, my chest is warm, my back, I'm a happy camper. When I first finished making the main rectangle, it was just slightly short of being able to really envelop me. And so I thought, what could I do to just get a couple extra inches on this and get this cozy feel? So what I decided to do was add on to the short edges. The wrap already had a seed stitch border on the side here. And so I had just picked up along that edge and just started stitching. I did a tiny bit of ribbing and then went for a garter stitch on this side. And as I was, because I knit it vertically, long ways, these long rows. In order to finish them off, I actually went from stockinette straight into ribbing on this end. And then I finished off with an I-cord border, which is a really sturdy border. I don't mind the drape of the rest of the wrap, but I like having the structure of the I-cord bind off on this portion here. And then on the other end, you know, I had the cast on edge, and I had some ribbing on there as well. And on that side, I just cast off in the stretchy ribbing. I didn't do anything special on that end. So when I wrap it around me, I put the I-cord border at my neck here, and I have the ribbing on the bottom, which makes it kind of flowy. And on either side, I have some garter stitch panels, which were knit primarily to use up these minis as a pop of color on either side. I love it. I love it so much. I feel like I'm surrounded by all of the good properties of the plants that went into this dye job, and I'm reminded of the fact that Adrian must have spent months dyeing these mini skeins and experimenting, and that just feels really special. I love it. I may use a shawl pin or something like that to keep it closed if I'm moving around a lot and wearing it, but it's long enough that I can throw it over my shoulder and kind of tuck it in certain places, and it works really well, almost like a poncho. See there? Go over my shoulder and around me. Love it. Highly recommend large, long rectangles for blissfully simple knitting time, but also for something like this where you just want all the properties of beautiful yarns to be showcased. I also want to quickly give a shout out to a few other makers who have just made my ensemble very comfortable and colorful today. My headscarf is actually an eco-printed silk scarf, which has gorgeous leaves and other plant prints on it. This was eco-printed by my Maria, who is the host of the Ninja Chickens podcast, and I wear these often. The silk is a great material for my hair. It's very gentle on my hair, but I also just love the colors that she's able to get from plants, and it's a good reminder of her. My necklace actually has some small ceramic yarn balls on it. These were made by Natalie of Remembrances Pottery, and then they were strung into this necklace format for me by Amy, and she has a gorgeous jewelry making site, which I will link below. And I'm wearing my Patricia Camilla pinafore, one of my most successful sewn garments. It's got pockets, and it's a chambray fabric, which I learned after I'd already chosen it. It's thrifted fabric, and it's got like that light denim gorgeous feel. I loved this sewing pattern so much so that I thought I would just show you the front cover of it, because this shows you the different formats. I actually went with this format with the cross tie at the back, but you can see here there's at least 4 different ways you can make it, other than just adjusting your length and other things. You could mix and match. And my friend Ellen Mason is the designer, and I'll link to this below as well. Well, that covers the makers who are making me feel awesome right now. Let's talk about my reflections on planning. I'm gonna sit back a bit and get comfortable, because this is really just a conversation. I'm not trying to advise anyone on how to become a planning type person. I'm just sharing with you what it's been like for me. This is podcasting real behind the scenes. All right, so what I did is I wrote down some thoughts about in the midst of this, what I was feeling about becoming a person who tries to sketch out a schedule for the day. I'm very interested to hear what some of you think about as you hear me talk about this, because I've seen friends of mine be very successful with putting a structure to their day, their week, their month, even their year. And I've done a little bit of it over time. I've dabbled, but never took it seriously as a daily practice. And that's really what I'm trying to cultivate now. Planning as a daily practice, purposely thinking about how I would like the day to go, or what I'd like to fit into the day, and that balance that I talked about earlier. So as usual, if you have comments on this, I hope that you'll feel comfortable to share them with me. Here we go. So I'll show you just a little bit of me writing in this book, because I've done this in a way that appeals to me. I put in the day and date, the day of the week and the date. Hope you don't mind, I put us a little more face to face. So I start out with writing in the day of the week, and then I am doing mostly half-hour and 1-hour stints right now. So here's an example. The day of the week, the date of the month, and then the blocks of time, which I kind of outline in writing and with a different color for each block. This format is something that I just kind of naturally came up with. In fact, even doing my poor man's version of cursive writing of the day and date, that was just about slowing down as I start this exercise each time. I'm doing a little bit of semi-cursive lettering to slow down and realize this is where I am today. It's Friday and this is the date. And then the colors honestly happened because as I wrote out the blocks of time, I had my colored pencils nearby, and I was thinking that'd be a cool way to kind of mark off each hour, is just to give it a different color. And I find it pleasing to look at, plain and simple. I just like looking at it that way. I've seen folks who have planners that allow them to use stickers and different pens and, you know, little title blocks and stuff. And I think that's great, especially if it makes you more likely to come back each day or each time period and do it. So that's my version of this, is just put a little color in there and make it appealing to write in. So yeah, I wrote out some reflections and I'm going to share them with you. I'll use them as my guide. I should have just folded the page so that I could easily find this. Here we go, found it. Planning reflections. I'm laughing at myself. Okay, the title of this entry is Planning Reflections, and the first bullet point says, starting was hard. Starting was hard. As I said, this came out of a conversation where I was trying to understand why I was feeling so overwhelmed, and actually addressing that by writing down my day was hard. Because if I think about that now, I think it's because just admitting that something needs to change can sometimes be really tough. And I was missing creative time. I was missing my more peaceful knitting time, and I was missing the moments of just blissfully sinking into a project for a stretch. But it was hard for me to face that and then put a box around it. Next reflection says, writing it down does make a difference. So after about a week of writing out my days hour by hour and putting in what I would like to do and marking off the things that happened and marking the things that didn't happen, it put me in a very different mindset about my day. And I will tell you that the initial couple of weeks, it was just discovery after discovery. I have a lot more time in the evening than I realized to do what I'd like to do after my full-time work is done. Things take longer than I assume. I haven't looked all the way, but I think that must be in here somewhere. I underestimate the time it takes to do things. That really shows up in my knitting. Every time I start a project up to now, I think I have really underestimated how much time I will actually end up spending with that project. Does that happen to you? I think even in garment terms, I think that something is just a couple of weeks worth of time. And I can't tell if I've ever knit a sweater in a couple of weeks. I certainly have not done that even with smaller items like socks and shawls. But in my head, some of these things are not that big in terms of time spent, except what happens is when I am overwhelmed, I'm only spending tiny little bits of time on those projects each time I pick it up, and that just drags out the timeline for that project by a lot. So yes, those are some of the discoveries that were coming. And when I wrote it down and I said, oh, I'm going to spend 30 minutes working on my shawl project. And I would look at the time, 30 minutes had passed, and I would say, I have not done very much on this shawl, which in itself is fine. It's not a race in that sense. It's more like in order to finish this shawl in half an hour blocks, I need to accept that this is going to be a multi-week project. My next reflection says, building in buffer time or open time is really important. I did not do this in the beginning. In my typical style, I wrote out the hours of the day and I filled every single one with a thing. I would go back to back with activities and things that I wanted to get done. And in my workday, I'm fortunate that I don't always have meetings every single hour, but I would write out my workday schedule, and even in that workday schedule, I would plug in something to work on when I wasn't on a call. And that really came back to bite me. It almost turned me away from doing this, because what would happen is I would do those blocks of time, fill them all in, pre-plan them all out with no buffer, no open time, no transition time. And then one small thing would change for the day. An additional call would get added to my calendar. Or if I was finished work and I had planned to do a stretch of making, something would happen here at home, or something from the day before that didn't get done still needed to be attended to. And I hadn't accounted for that. There was no openness. And the snowball cascade mudslide begins. And I go right back to feeling like I don't have the time that I need to do the things that I want to do. So building in buffer time and open time, I have now clearly, after 1 month, seen the value of that. I really almost force myself to put in a half an hour or an hour that just says open. And I've seen how when things change and are unexpected, I just feel super grateful for that open time where I don't feel like, oh, this thing is going to now be shifted and I have to rearrange. Nope, it's accounted for. Here's a quick one. A simple and mostly constructed by me versus a preset layout works well for me. So this is all being done just in my handwriting. The book itself was a planner, so it had 1 day each page already. Is that right? No, I'm sorry. It's 1 week at a time. 3 days here and the other 4 days here. But because I'm literally writing over top of that preset format, because this was a 2020 book and we're in 2021, I'm just writing over that pre-printed format and I'm doing a day on each page. That's working beautifully for me. It also allowed me, and bless my little frugal heart, it allowed me to use something I already had and not go out and buy something else. And I just kind of love that. So yeah, that works for me. I think if there were reason for me to look for a layout that was already pre-printed or something, I'd probably still look for something that was very open and that could be adjusted to my own days. Because I have been writing things down and putting in what I'd like to do with a chunk of time, I see progress on things sooner. It seems so simple. It's in and of itself, it's not a revelation that when you focus on things, you're more likely to get more of those things done. But it feels like an epiphany for me because I'm aware and I'm paying attention. With my knitting projects, especially a shawl that I'm working on that I'll share with you at some point soon, I'm working on a border and it's a knitted on border and it's taking a long time in the grand scheme of things. But every time I pick it up, because I put in an hour's worth of time on it the day before, I can see that progress very explicitly. With work, my projects tend to run over the course of many weeks, even months, and they require blocks of time, and there's a lot of iteration and going back and fixing and tweaking. And I see progress when I say, today I'm going to spend an hour on this part of this project. And then the next day I can build on that. So I'm really, that one is powerful for me and I'm really grateful for it, because when I felt a bit more scattered and I was doing little bits here and there and I would pick up things and put them down, I don't like the feeling of spending longer than I need to on something. I realize that now. A couple more reflections. I spend less time scrolling on my phone. Anyone find that relatable at all? The way that the world that lives inside this device can bend time, and you look up for it and an hour and a half has passed? Yeah. Shame-free zone. It just is. When I'm not attentive to it, I can let a lot of time pass with my face in my phone. Instagram, YouTube, websites, TikTok, whatever. I find joy in the interactions that I get in that scrolling. But sometimes it literally is mindless and not in a good way. And for too long in terms of not getting things done that I need to get done. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. Sometimes I genuinely waste time on there. And that's a subjective thing. What I decided is that each of my days, I like to go out and visit with my friends that live in my phone. So I put time in for that. I just found that that was the only way to do it without feeling any shame and without beating myself up. I plan for time to be on my phone, and then I plan for time to have it away from me. And that seems to be working so far. But yeah, generally speaking, when I plan out my days and I look at kind of priority order of things, I just end up spending less time scrolling. A couple more. Let's see. I talked about how I underestimate the time things take. Okay, so a reminder that came to me because of this exercise is that some of my fiber craft is work. I am a knitwear designer. I host certain make-alongs in our community. I have this amazing podcast platform to share with all of you. And so some of my craft time is actual work time. And I go back and forth with that label for something that is also a passion and a hobby and heart-centered, but it's work. Let's just call it what it is. Answering emails, drafting designs, constructing online events is work. It takes time. It takes planning. It takes chunks of my brain and my energy. And what I used to do is I wouldn't want to put plans to those things that were very finite, because then it felt like I was stealing from the woo. If that's not a familiar term, what I'm trying to say is putting a box around my heart work felt like it didn't match up somehow. And I went through this exercise knowing that I need to put a box around some of my crafting activities. And I saw that actually it's not bad to separate out those things and to organize them. It's not that bad. And to be honest, it's for a greater good. I like when things are done well, especially for my heyBrownBerry design related business and for things that need planning because I'm bringing community members together. I like how it feels when that stuff is done well, and the only way to do it well is to plan out chunks of time to do it well and to reflect and review and iterate there. So I pull in those skills and that kind of structure from my day job now more willingly because of this planning practice that I'm embracing. All right, so I guess the last one I'll share with you is, like a lot of things, this subject of planning and being organized can often, it can almost be divisive. If you've ever heard people talk about being a morning person, a cat or dog person, a people person, we describe ourselves in this way. I'm a planning person. I'm not a planning person. I've been reflecting on the fact that by identifying a whole person by a thing that they do or a thing that they like, I don't feel like that works for all of us. I'm going to speak for myself. I have come to this practice and realized that creating an idea of myself and a whole personhood around what are actually just choices and practices and habits is not something I want to do. I don't want to assign who I am when really it's about what I choose to do. So if I had said to myself continuously, I'm not a planning person. I don't like a certain level of structure and too much organization, especially around my fibery things, I may never have come to this practice. And I do feel overall this has been very positive. So instead of saying I'm not a planning person, I'm saying to myself, I used to not choose to plan my days in a certain way, and now I choose to do that. And I'm going to continue choosing to do that so I can continue seeing how it works for me. So I'm taking on a planning habit. I'm embracing a planning practice in a way that works for me right now. And I'm really glad to have this record through this podcast of how I feel about it in this moment, just a month in. And I will very likely come back to it at some point this year to see how I'm feeling about it later. In the meantime, I'm hoping that you will share some thoughts around this topic with me. I really get so much from our conversations. I can't say that enough. And I know that some of you will have different perspectives on this. I don't tend to want to offer advice to anyone about how to do these kinds of things. But if you want to do a bit of reflection and share it with me, I welcome it. Enjoy some more scenes of my neighborhood friends while I bid you goodbye for now. And I wish you a very, very good week. And I am so happy that we could be here together and that we can see each other again another time. I plan to make that happen. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.